have here the guidelines that were issued by the Diocese of Gallup, New Mexico. This is under the pastoral leadership of Bishop James Wall, the bishop of that diocese. And I'm going to zoom into the section on the rules in that diocese for the distribution of Holy Communion. Only use of ordinary ministers of Holy Communion. Now, this means priests and deacons. Bishops, of course, too, but priests and deacons. An extraordinary minister of Holy Communion would be a lay person to whom it has been delegated the not authority, but the office of helping to distribute Holy Communion at Mass. So that's an extraordinary scenario. Now, the terms ordinary and extraordinary, when it comes to Catholic law and theology, they have other meanings as well. But this is something he's saying, is that there will be no lay people distributing Holy Communion. Prior to Mass and distribution of Holy Communion, ministers are to thoroughly wash their hands. Communion stations that allow for 6 feet physical distancing. Table next to the station with an ablution bowl that would have water in it where you can rinse your hands off. Hand sanitizer, a towel, and a corporal. A corporal is that starched piece of white linen that would, for example, you typically would see it at the altar, would be directly beneath the chalice and the paten where the host lies. So there will be a corporal there on this table. It talks about social distancing. No, let me get back to distribution of Holy Communion. Let's see. Should any part of the minister's hand come into contact with the communicant, he should immediately dip the hand in the ablution bowl and then clean his hand with hand sanitizer, waiting at least 10 seconds for the hands to dry before resuming distribution of Holy Communion. Use visible tape on the floor to clearly delineate 6 feet in order for communicants to maintain physical distancing while approaching Holy Communion. Distribution of the ancillary chalices is suspended. Now, that's referring to the additional chalices that would be brought out for the people to consume the precious blood of Jesus. So the chalice that the priest uses at Mass on the altar, that's the only chalice with precious blood that's permitted. An alternative to distribute communion at the end of Mass has been proposed as an acceptable procedure if it adds a safety for all concerned based on the individual circumstance of the church, faculty, and staff. And then it goes on to things like, singing at best, very limited, and then how to social distance. But one thing you'll notice here is that there's no mention of that you must receive communion in the hand only, because the bishop of the Diocese of Gallup, he recognizes and respects the church's law on this issue. And the church's law says that nobody can be prevented from receiving Holy Communion on the tongue if that's what they wish. And so I bring this to your attention because, to my mind, this is a model example of how to follow, in a very sensible way, how to follow the medical guidelines and how to do everything possible to reduce the spread, the transmission of the COVID-19 virus. And yet at the same time, under these weird circumstances, nonetheless, be as respectful as possible during Holy Communion and recognize and respect your right to receive Holy Communion on the tongue if you wish to do so. So I'll leave it at that, but I wanted to share that with you. Now, I want to transition into the topic that I mentioned earlier. And Cyrus, please get that Ronald Reagan audio ready, because that's going to play. Thank you. It's going to play into this. This is being reported as of yesterday. The Archdiocese of Baltimore said it has serious concerns about public health guidance from Howard County, Maryland, which prohibits, listen to this now, it prohibits the reception of communion in any way. You can go to church, okay, you can listen to the sermon, you can do all those things, but you're not allowed to receive communion as a condition for churches to reopen during the coronavirus pandemic. For the Catholic community, the reception of communion is central to our faith lives and to our public worship. This is according to a statement from the Archdiocese. Since learning of the concerns of Howard County officials, we have shared our guidelines for the distribution of communion and express our own serious concerns about their recent guidance preventing Catholic churches in Howard County from distributing communion. Do you get what this is? This is the local county government saying, hey, guess what, Catholics? All right, if you got to go to Mass, all right, you can go to Mass, but you're not allowed to receive communion. What? Yeah, you heard us right. You're not allowed to receive communion. What on earth are you saying? You have no authority to tell us whether or not we can receive Holy Communion. Yeah, we do. And you're not allowed to receive Holy Communion. Howard County's Executive Order 2020-09, published on May 26, just a couple of days ago, outlines the conditions and regulations that must be met for non-essential businesses, which, don't you know, churches are considered. And in Maryland, that includes churches and other houses of worship. So in order to resume operations, they must buckle under the weight of this new edict, Executive Order 2020-09. The order was released by Howard County Executive Calvin Ball. The order provides that, quote, there shall be no consumption of food or beverage of any kind before, during, or after religious services, including food and beverage that would typically be consumed as part of a religious service. What do you think that means? Since the consumption of the consecrated species at Mass is, at least by the celebrant, is an integral part of the Eucharistic rite, the order effectively bans the celebration of the Mass. So it's not just you who are not allowed, according to our so-called superiors at Howard County, you are not allowed to go forward to receive Holy Communion, but the priest, according to the rules and regs that are here in this Executive Order 2020-09, he's not allowed to consume, quote-unquote, food or beverage. That means no Mass. Mas, no Mass. Mass, no Mass. No more Mass. So think about this. The Archdiocese said it is committed to ensuring churches reopen safely after closure amid the coronavirus pandemic. The Archdiocese, for its part, says it has developed thorough and carefully thought-out guidelines for resuming public masses, including detailed guidance on the safe distribution of Holy Communion. These guidelines respect both the sanctity of the sacrament and the need for abundant caution to protect the health and safety of both those receiving and distributing Holy Communion. This according to the Archdiocese. Continuing on. While we recognize and value the urgent desire to guard the health and safety of local communities that is guiding the decisions of our government leaders, we are committed to engaging in dialogue with them to work together towards a policy going that balances the need for free expression of religious faith with the public's health and safety interests. This is like a study in restraint, because if I were the Archbishop, now God in his mercy did not see fit to inflict Patrick Madrid upon the church as a bishop. And all God's people said, amen. But if I were a bishop, my blood is boiling over this. And I would say, badges, we don't got no badges. We don't need no badges. We don't need no stinking badges. Of course we're going to have Holy Communion, because this is Mass after all. By the way, this is the mother church of the Catholic faith in the United States. Did you know that? Baltimore, considered the mother church, the primordial diocese, goes way, way back. And, I must give the Archbishop of Baltimore, Archbishop Lori, a lot of credit for his restraint, because if it were me, I would be pounding my fist. I would be saying, try to stop us, Howard County. And start with me, by the way, as the Archbishop. And by the way, I'm praising Archbishop Lori for his restraint. They're being diplomatic. They're being delicate. They're being tactful. I probably would not be any of those things. I'd probably say, come with your handcuffs and arrest me first, because I'm going to be distributing Holy Communion at Mass. I'm going to be receiving the body and blood of Jesus at Mass, because that's what Mass is all about. What did Jesus say at the Last Supper to the apostles? Take and eat of this. That's the essence of the Mass. And you can't have the Mass if the priest does not, at the very least, if he himself does not consume the Holy Eucharist and the precious blood at Mass, you can't have a Mass. You see. So I am I'm exercised by this. And for what it's worth, I'm just a guy with a microphone. But to the extent that anybody who has any sway in the Archdiocese of Baltimore is concerned, I've got your back. I'm right there with you. I support you. And my advice would be, just ignore this stupid order and see what happens. Just ignore it. What are they going to do? Are they going to arrest the Archbishop of Baltimore because he says, get out of my way, we're having Mass, and there's nothing you can do about it? How's that going to look when the Howard County people, they put the Archbishop of Baltimore in jail because he's celebrating Mass. That's not going to look good. That's not going to play in Peoria. So my thinking is go for it and see what happens. I mean, think about Dr. Martin Luther King and the Freedom Riders. And hey, get out of that seat. You're not allowed to sit there on the bus. You can't sit there. You have to go to the back of the bus. Sorry, I'm in this seat and I'm going to stay in this seat. And you know what happened? It was a confrontation between the bloated, power-grabbing people who said, you can't sit in this seat because you're black, and those people who were allied with Dr. Martin Luther King and the Freedom Riders, and the people said, sorry, we're going to do what we have a right to do, and you can't stop us. And they tried to stop them, and they won, they being the Freedom Riders. The civil rights people, they won because they did not buckle under the pressure of stupid regulations like black people can't sit at the front of the bus, or black people can't sit at this counter for lunch, or black people are not allowed to use this restroom or this drinking fountain. All those Jim Crow laws that were a terrible hangover from the Reconstruction era after the Civil War. And when finally enough people had the gumption to say, to heck with you, I'm drinking out of this water fountain, I'm using this restroom, I'm sitting at this lunch counter, I'm sitting in this bus seat, and there's nothing you can do to stop me, that's when they won. So my advice, if the local tinhorn dictator in your county or your city or your state or your country says something ridiculous like, hey, guess what, Catholics, you can go to Mass. You can stand and sit and kneel and all those Catholic calisthenics that you do, and you can hear the word of God, and you can do all that stuff, but you can't receive Holy Communion. That's a bridge too far. Listen to what Ronald Reagan had to say. He was not speaking about anything religious, per se anyway, but he was speaking about fundamental freedoms that we, at least until recently, have enjoyed in this country. And we'll go to a break, but we're going to go to a break listening to what President Reagan said about the importance of fighting for your freedom.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening. Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. Not too long ago, two friends of mine were talking to a Cuban refugee, a businessman who had escaped from Castro. And in the midst of his story, one of my friends turned to the other and said, we don't know how lucky we are. And the Cuban stopped and said, how lucky you are. I had some place to escape to. And in that sentence, he told us the entire story. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
The last stand on earth. Yeah, where are you going to escape to? Sweden? With all due respect, I have relatives in Sweden. Where are you going to escape to? I mean, Ronald Reagan was speaking. I mean, I miss that guy. Man, do I miss that guy. I won't even get into that. He was speaking about politics and, freedoms that are enshrined in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all those things. But I'm telling you, this situation in Howard County, Maryland, is a microcosm of the same kind of problem, but just a different kind of freedom that they're seeking to trample upon. And mark my words, if enough people, Catholics now, and Christians of any persuasion, okay, just people of goodwill, religious people in general, let's just broaden it, to the extent that the majority of people simply roll over and say, okay, you say I can't go to Holy Communion, okay, I won't go to Holy Communion, then, like the old saying goes, give them an inch and they'll take a mile. Then the next thing will be this. Then the next thing after that will be that. It will have a cascading effect. And when it becomes perceived that Catholics and others are willing to just say, okay, if you say so, they'll do more and more and more. This is how tyrannies start. And who knows where all this is going to go, but I know this much. Here and now, when it comes to something like them telling you that you can't receive Holy Communion when you go to Mass. You can go to Mass, but you can't receive Holy Communion because, COVID-19. You should say no. That's what I'm going to say if it ever happens where I live. No, I'm not going to do that. And I just want to reiterate my encouragement for the clergy. Today, Baltimore, tomorrow, the world. I want to encourage the clergy, bishops, priests, deacons. And of course, the leadership of the bishop is paramount. Be united with your bishop. Be loyal to your bishop. And all the things that go into that. But bishops especially, and priests also, and to some extent deacons, stand up against this. Because if it works in Baltimore, it's going to come to where you are. Look at the bishops of Minnesota under the leadership of Archbishop Hebda. What was it, last week? They said to the governor of the great state of Minnesota, I'm sorry, we're sorry, but we're not going to abide by these restrictions. We're not going to do it. We're going to open our churches. And you say we can't open it, we're going to open them. We like you, and we want to get along, and we're going to be good citizens, et cetera, but you're not going to deprive the faithful of the ability to go to Mass just because you say so. And they opened the churches, and you'll notice that Archbishop Hebda is not sitting in a jail cell today. They're not going to arrest the Archbishop of Baltimore for saying, sorry, guys, we're going to have Holy Communion whether you like it or not. They're not going to, and if they want to arrest him, that's even better. Because now you've got a galvanizing moment when people like Rosa Parks, I'm going to sit in this seat on the bus. I'm not going to move to the back of the bus because I'm black. Sorry, I'm not going to do it. Or those students who were forbidden from enrolling in, University of Mississippi, I forget. And George Wallace, the governor of the state, stood on the steps with cops and guns and dogs to prevent them. And guess who won? They won because they said, we're going to do it anyway. And they did it and they won. Don't back down. Siempre adelante, as Junípero Serra said. Always forward. I'll be right back with Hour 3 right after this. Let's go to Conrad now, listening in Baltimore, where I was just talking about. Hi, Conrad.
Semper Fidelis there, Patrick. Hey, let me tell you something. My blood is boiling like you would not believe.
I hear you.
One of my concerns is that, yes, it is true. I used to live in Howard County. I now live in Anne Arundel County, which is right next door to Howard County.
Okay.
And when they talk about real food and real drink being eliminated from our church, it just drove me crazy.
Yeah.
The other thing that drives me crazy is their way of trying to limit the number of worshipers that are even allowed in a church, regardless of the size of the building. They're stating that only 10 people can go into church, even though we can maintain that arbitrary 6 feet of distance between attendees of the Mass.
Yeah.
And my issue is that, and you are so right, Patrick, as a Marine, we were responsible to pick up our weapons and head into battle. Mm-hmm. I want our bishops and priests to do the same thing that our military had to do to defend this country, and for them to begin to start defending our Catholic faith, because this quarantine has stopped the outward signs instituted by Christ to give grace. It is eliminating us of the faithful to participate in those very things that make us Catholic.
Right. By the way, just FYI, I never had the honor of serving in the military, so I myself am not a Marine, a former Marine. I guess you're not supposed to say former Marine, but I never had that honor to do that. But I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you.
And I think we should contact the executive of Anne Arundel County because right now he still holds our places of worship as non-essential, even though the President of the United States has made that change. Now, everything that they wish to do to try and control us, that's fine, but I think you're right, is that we don't need to ask for permission in order to express our faith to God. And what they're trying to do is, and as you know this, is that to make, worship of God in your church, in an assembly, in a congregation, is not important. Therefore, you can only worship God the way we think you should.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't help but remember St. Ambrose of Milan defying that government and holding Mass, and Father Damien, too, in Molokai, providing those essential needs to the individuals that were there. I'm sorry. My blood is boiling over this. And I think we need to make a stand, not to have permission, but to celebrate in our way of recognizing Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior.
We don't need their permission.
And I hope people call.
Yeah.
And I hope people call the executive at 410-222-1785 and change this ridiculous guideline.
Yeah. What was that number again, Conrad? I didn't quite hear it.
410-222-1785, and the executive of Anne Arundel County is Stuart Pittman. And here's the other thing, that Anne Arundel County and Howard County are like brother and sister when it comes to schools shutting down and what have you. They piggyback off of each other. And I guarantee you they're going to piggyback each other off of this ridiculous executive order stating who can and cannot and how you should worship. So, Patrick, I'm fuming. I really am. And I hope our priests have a conversation with Bishop Laurie, please, and let's just celebrate and be able to participate in the sacraments that make Catholics unique and leaders of the faithful.
I agree. I 100% agree, Conrad. Thank you. And you can help lead the charge locally.
And you know what, Patrick, you're right. It's all about local. It has nothing to do with national. It has nothing about the world. It's Christ taught locally. We should be preaching and doing things locally and starting with the family.
Right. I'm with you.
All right, brother. Appreciate it. God
Thank
bless.
you, Conrad.
Keep up the good work, and don't let this go away.
I won't. I'm going to keep speaking up for as long as I've got breath in my body. And I hope that's for a long time. We'll see what God has in mind. You know, I'm reminded of that famous story from the Battle of the Bulge during World War II. And General Anthony McAuliffe, he was, surrounded. The Battle of the Bulge is an amazing story, and how the American forces were surrounded by the Germans, and we won it, but it was by a whisker. But the Germans sent him an order to surrender, and he gave them a one-word answer: nuts. As in, interpret it how you want, but you're nuts if you think we're going to surrender. And that's one of those classic stories. If you watch the movie Patton, I think it's even in that with George C. Scott. I think it's even in that. Another thing that comes to my mind is the image that is burned into my memory of a Catholic priest wearing full vestments. So he's got his biretta on top, and he's got the chasuble. He's celebrating Mass, but he's not celebrating Mass. He's wearing his vestments. He has his hands folded, and he has his back to the wall. He's outside the church. And about 5 feet away from him are like 6 guys with rifles. They're the firing squad that put him to death. Because during the Mexican persecution of the Catholic Church, especially in the 1920s, where it became illegal for Mass to be celebrated, it became illegal for all the sacraments of the church to be celebrated. Why? Because the government said so. Sorry, you're not going to do that anymore. And I have a long talk on this very topic, but I won't get into that now, except to say I'm a student of this era of Mexican history. My own family lived through it. And so the stories have been passed down to me from my grandmother, for example. And this priest was executed. Why? Because he was celebrating Mass in defiance of the Mexican authorities, who said, you can't do that. And he said, try to stop me. And of course they did, but they gave him a one-way express ticket to heaven. So, he got the last laugh. Point being, and I'm going to find this picture and we're going to post it. Point being is, especially when it comes to something like this is what martyrs die for. And believe you me, I'm not in any hurry to get in line to become a martyr. That's not on my list of things to do. Now, who knows what God has in mind? I don't know. If ever it should come, I hope and pray that I would be ready, willing, and able. I don't think I am at this moment, to be honest with you. I'm fearful like anyone else of death. But, there's a victory to be won, and the conquering heroes, the martyrs who are willing to endure even the shedding of their own blood to stand up for what is right. That's why they're such great heroes of the faith, because they didn't let anything get in the way of pursuing their love for Jesus Christ and standing firm in the face of persecution. So I'm not eager to sign anyone up for martyrdom. I'm not. But at the same time, we have in the Catholic faith, the Catholic Church has a 2,000-year glorious history of faithful men and women, boys and girls, who are willing to even shed their blood if it became necessary for the cause of Christ. And little things lead up to big things. Little things lead up to big things. I'm thinking about in the lead up to Hitler's rise to power. And as he was rising to power in the late 1920s and into the early 30s, and people were starting to get nervous, and what's going on here? And Mein Kampf had been published, and he was telling everybody, this is what I'm going to do. If I get into power, this is what we should do. And people were getting nervous, and they weren't doing a whole lot about it. And eventually it got to the point where it was too late. And so all the little preliminary things that Hitler and his henchmen were doing to the Jews, you have to register now as a Jew. You have to have a certain sign on the window of your shop so that people will know that you're Jews. You have to have a Star of David. Eventually, you have to wear a yellow armband. See how it's ratcheting up and ratcheting up and ratcheting up? You have to live in a certain ghetto area. You're not allowed to live in the rest of the city where you might want to live. You got to live here. And you can't leave this ghetto. You're not allowed to come out. You're not allowed to, go visit your friends. Little things led up to big things. The next thing you know, you've got Auschwitz and the crematoria smokestacks going day and night. That's where it leads to. Now, if you're saying, oh, come on, Patrick Madrid, this is melodramatic and you're overblowing it, and that's never going to happen here in the United States, I hope and pray that it never does, believe me. And I'm not predicting that it will, but I can tell you this, that if you just sit down and take it because some tinhorn dictator at the county level decides that you're not allowed to receive Holy Communion, and I'm talking to bishops and priests and lay faithful, everybody needs to hear this. If you just sit there and take it, more and more and more nibbling away will take place because they'll see that you're willing to sit down and take it. There was an amazing archbishop in Münster, Germany, and I went to his cathedral. I was on a speaking tour in Germany some years ago. And one of the places that I stayed, I didn't stay there, but I stopped there for a while, was the cathedral in Münster, Germany. And his name was Archbishop, his last name was von Galen, so he was aristocratic. When you see a German name that's got von in it, then that tells you there's some aristocracy in the background. I think it was Aloysius Clemens von Galen, something like that. But he was an implacable foe of Adolf Hitler in the years leading up to, and including during the height of World War II. And they weren't afraid of much, but they were afraid of him. And he would preach from the pulpit, denouncing the Nazis and denouncing Hitler. And somehow, some way, they didn't have the gumption to arrest him and kill him, because you'd think that that's what would happen. But he was one of those few voices among the bishops who, rightfully understood what was happening, and they were, afraid like everybody else. He wasn't afraid. He just stood up and he delivered the truth. He spoke truth to power. Look him up. In fact, I'm going to get an article that I published in a magazine that I used to publish called Envoy Magazine. I'm going to find that article and I'll get it posted for you sometime soon. But he would be a name that you should get to know, because he said, nope, not going to do it. Sorry. And all I'm saying is little things lead up to big things. So in this country, who knows what direction things are going to go? I hope that we, as it says in 1 Timothy chapter 2, that we can lead a quiet and tranquil life in all dignity and devotion. I love that passage. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 4. Pray that we may lead a quiet and tranquil life in all dignity and devotion. That's what I'm hoping for. But who knows? Man proposes, God disposes. We'll see where things go. But if we get into the habit of just saying, okay, the petty tinhorn dictators at the county level or the state level or whatever, who don't have a right to infringe upon your right to receive Holy Communion at Mass, they do not have that right. But they're going to trample on it if they think they can. So it's going to require gumption. It's going to require resolve. It's going to, you're going to need to set your face like flint and be like those freedom riders and say, I am not going to participate in this. I'm not going to move to the back of the bus. I'm not going to do that. And then push comes to shove and we see what happens. But I'm telling you, they're not going to be able to arrest the Archbishop of Baltimore and all of the priests and all the faithful who are going forward to receive Holy Communion. They don't have enough jail cells for that. And that's how you force change in a positive direction. I'm not advocating violence, not far from it. I'm not advocating civil disobedience when it comes to the laws that are legitimate and appropriate. I'm not saying that you should go and do things just because you can. I'm saying stand up for your rights as a Catholic. Stand up for the right that you have to receive Holy Communion. And don't let anyone take that away from you. I'll be right back. Let's go now to Bob listening in Shawnee, Oklahoma. Hi, Bob.
Hello, Patrick. Yeah, I always believe that the highest protection of God will be in the heat of the battle. And it looks to me like we're maybe approaching that persevering to the end Scripture.
Perhaps
in
so.
some respects.
Yeah, perhaps so.
And for any bishop or priest that are waiting for the right time to make a move, or laity for that matter, should consult Ecclesiastes 11:4, where it says, I'll read it here.
Okay.
He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. In other words, they're just waiting for that perfect time. Well, right now is the perfect time.
Right.
And in my perspective, and I believe that the highest protection of God will be in the heat of the battle.
That's a powerful thought. So, as you survey the situation, the COVID lockdown, and I don't deny the reality of this virus. People are dying of it. That's true. But all those other questions aside, when you say the heat of the battle, do you see this as the battle, or do you see this as part of a bigger picture?
Oh, I see it's a part of the bigger picture, and I believe more is coming. And right now, we should determine that we're going to take that stand.
Right.
And it just and if we want the protection from God in this, I believe it'll be in the very center of the battle, the heat of the battle.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just a thought.
Don't disagree. No, I don't disagree. Special protection is needed when circumstances are extreme. That's for sure. We've had it so easy, Bob, as you know, for so long. In the United States, for example, Catholics have become fat and happy because we've had it so easy for so long. I mean, it wasn't all that long ago when in the 19th century our Catholic forefathers and foremothers were coming over from Italy and Ireland and other places, and they had to fight for their rightful place in society, and there were signs saying, no Irish need apply, because there was blatant discrimination against Catholics and those from countries where they looked different and their skin was different. And they fought, and they succeeded because they were not going to just sit down and do nothing. We live in a similar time, perhaps, where the worst thing we can do is just sit back and say, okay, you're saying that we can't go to Mass or we can't go to communion when we go to Mass? Okay, if that's what you say. So I say we shouldn't do that, Bob. Sounds like you and I are on the same wavelength.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for the beautiful verse, Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 4. Let's go to Rosemary now, listening in, is it Breezy Point, New York? That sounds very idyllic. Breezy Point. Do you have a wonderful view of the ocean there, Rosemary?
We have a wonderful view of the ocean and the bay.
Very nice.
We're on a peninsula.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Thank you for all the speech that you gave this morning. I consider it a sermon. I haven't heard a good sermon in 8 weeks or more. And I'm praying and I'm waiting, and I'm not seeing any plan of action. No Mass, no communion, sacraments restricted to practically none, people not getting buried correctly, no clear word coming through of the plan. And I'm praying for our priests and bishops. I know they have a harder job than me. I know they do. But I'm praying for them to have the backbone to stand up and do what you just said, what Archbishop Laurie is doing, what the bishop out in Minnesota did.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just praying for it. But I think you said something else about being fat and happy.
Yeah.
Well, I think I need to start fasting along with praying.
Mm. Mm.
That's the way I feel.
That's a word for
I'm
so
not
many
good
of
at
us.
I'm not good at it, though.
Nor am I. Nor am I. But I'm not ashamed to admit it. Fasting is not easy.
We needed you to rouse us up a little there.
Thank you. Great to hear from you, Rosemary. Thank you. I'm overdue for a break, so we'll do that and come back with more of the Patrick Madrid Show on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
For more of the Patrick Madrid Show, visit relevantradio.com/Patrick.